You know what's absolutely wild? The people who need others the least, the ones perfectly fine sitting alone on a Friday night, the ones who don't need a crowd to feel alive, the ones who actually enjoy their own company. These people somehow end up attracting the worst kinds of human beings. Yeah, you heard that right. The quiet ones, the independent ones, the ones who've built a life that doesn't revolve around social validation. They're the ones who end up surrounded by manipulators, narcissists, emotional vampires, and every shade of toxic personality you can imagine. And it's not random. It's not bad luck. It's a pattern, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. So let's talk about it. Let's pull back the curtain on this whole mess and figure out why the people who should be safe from toxic relationships are actually the ones most at risk. Here's the thing society doesn't want you to know. Being a loner doesn't mean you're unsocial. It means you're selective. It means you'd rather have silence than fake conversations. It means you'd rather be alone than surrounded by people who drain you. It means you've figured out something most people spend their whole lives avoiding. That you're actually pretty decent company for yourself. But here's where it gets twisted. The world sees that independence, that self-sufficiency, and it doesn't celebrate it. No. Instead, toxic people see it as an invitation, a challenge, a target. Because in their eyes, someone who doesn't need anyone is someone they can control, someone they can break, someone they can own. And that's where the whole nightmare begins. Let's start with the most obvious trap. Loners don't have a social army. Think about it. When someone's got 15 close friends, a huge family network, co-workers they actually like, and a social circle that checks in regularly, toxic people stay away from them. Why? Because there's too many witnesses. Too many people who'll notice the red flags. Too many voices that'll say, hey, something's off about that person. Too many protective layers. But a loner, they're out here operating solo. No backup, no safety net. No group chat buzzing with warnings when someone sketchy shows up. And toxic people know this. They can smell it. They see someone without a big social circle and think, perfect. No one's going to interfere. No one's going to pull them away. No one's going to tell them I'm full of it. It's like being the lone gazelle at the watering hole while the predators circle. Except instead of teeth and claws, these predators come with guilt trips, sob stories, and the ability to make you feel like you're the problem. Here's another layer to this mess. Loners tend to be observers. They watch, they listen. They don't jump to conclusions about people right away. You know why? Because they've probably been misunderstood themselves. They know what it's like when people make assumptions, so they give others the benefit of the doubt. Noble, right? Wrong. At least not when you're dealing with someone toxic. Because while a loner is sitting there thinking, maybe they're just having a bad day. Or maybe I'm being too harsh. The toxic person is testing boundaries, pushing limits, seeing how much they can get away with. The loner's patience gets misread as permission. Their quietness gets misread as acceptance. Their refusal to jump to conclusions gets misread as stupidity. And before they know it, they've tolerated behavior that should have been shut down immediately. What happens when you don't speak up right away? When you don't call out the disrespect, the manipulation, the lies? The toxic person learns. They learn that you're safe, that you won't fight back, that you'll absorb their chaos without complaining. And they dig in deeper. Now this is where it gets really twisted. Most people are out here desperate for validation. Likes, comments, compliments, invitations. They need external proof that they matter. Loners don't play that game. They're not chasing approval. They're not performing for an audience. They're not constantly checking to see if people like them. And you'd think that would make them less attractive to toxic people, right? Nope. It makes them more attractive. Because to a narcissist, to a manipulator, someone who doesn't need attention looks like a blank canvas. Someone they can shape, someone they can make dependent on them. The toxic person sees independence and thinks, challenge accepted. They want to be the one person you can't live without. They want to create that need in you, that desperate clinging need, because it feeds their ego. And when they succeed, when they get someone who was once perfectly self-sufficient to revolve around them, that's the ultimate power trip. Let's be honest about something. Toxic people are exhausting. They talk endlessly about themselves, their problems, their drama, their grievances, their exes, their trauma, their theories about why the world is against them. And most people, they tune out. They interrupt. They change the subject. They make excuses to leave. But loners, they listen, not because they're pushovers, but because listening is what they do. They're comfortable with silence. They don't need to fill every second with their own voice. They let people talk. At first, the toxic person thinks they've found gold. Someone who actually pays attention. Someone who cares. Someone who doesn't roll their eyes or check their phone. But it doesn't stay wholesome. It becomes one-sided. It becomes emotional dumping. It becomes the loner playing unpaid therapist to someone who has zero intention of actually changing or healing. And here's the kicker. When the loner finally needs to talk, when they need support, the toxic person disappears. Or worse, they make it about themselves. Oh, you think your day was bad? Let me tell you about my day. The listening that was supposed to be a strength becomes a trap. Now this one's subtle but brutal. Insecure people, and let's be clear, toxic people are deeply insecure. Cannot handle someone who's genuinely okay on their own. Think about it. When you don't need constant company, when you don't need validation, when you don't need someone to tell you you're good enough, you become a mirror, and that mirror reflects back all their inadequacies. So what do? They try to break you. They chip away at your confidence. They plant seeds of doubt. They try to make you second-guess yourself, your choices, your worth. You're being too sensitive. You're overthinking things. Maybe you're the problem. No one else would put up with you. They want to pull you down to their level, where they feel in control again. It's not about you at all. It's about their own internal chaos and their need to feel powerful by making you feel small. The empath trap. Here's a hard truth. A lot of loners are empaths, the ones who feel deeply, who pick up on emotions like Wi-Fi signals, who can sense when something's off. And toxic people hunt empaths. Why? Because empaths do something most people won't. They try to understand. They try to help. They try to fix. When a toxic person does something awful, an empath doesn't immediately walk away. They think, but what if they're hurt? What if they're struggling? What if I can help them change? And that's the trap. The toxic person doesn't want to change. They want a supply. They want someone to absorb their chaos, forgive their behavior, and keep coming back for more. Empaths make the perfect targets because they'll explain away bad behavior. They'll justify it. They'll take responsibility for things that aren't their fault. And the cycle continues, the conflict avoidance that backfires. Loners don't usually like drama. They prefer peace, they prefer calm. They prefer environments where they can just exist without chaos. So when conflict arises, when someone crosses a line, they let it slide. It's not worth the fight. Maybe it'll get better. I don't want to make things awkward. And you know who loves someone who avoids conflict? Toxic people. Because they know they can get away with murder. Metaphorically speaking, and you'll just absorb it, tolerate it, brush it off. They push a little further, then a little further, then a little further. And by the time the loner realizes what's happening, they've tolerated way too much. They're exhausted. They're angry at themselves for not speaking up sooner. But the toxic person? They've already moved into full control mode. Here's something people don't talk about enough. Loners often look strong. They look self-controlled. They look like they've got it together. And that drives certain types of people absolutely insane. Narcissists, manipulators, control freaks. They see that quiet strength and they want to break it. Not because you did anything to them, but because your existence reminds them of what they're not. They want to prove that you're not as strong as you seem. They want to crack the surface. They want to show the world, and themselves, that even you can be broken. It's a sick game, a twisted power play. And the loner becomes the trophy in a competition they never signed up for. Here's where it gets a little uncomfortable. Loners often don't broadcast their boundaries clearly. Not because they don't have boundaries, but because they assume people will just behave like decent human beings. They think, I don't need to tell someone not to disrespect me, that should be obvious. And in a perfect world, yeah, it should be. But toxic people don't operate in a perfect world. They operate in a world where silence equals permission. Where not saying no means yes. Where lack of confrontation means they can do whatever they want. So when a loner doesn't explicitly state, hey, don't talk to me like that, or that behavior isn't acceptable. The toxic person hears nothing, and they take that nothing and run with it. Let's talk about the most messed up part of this whole situation. Loners are rare. In a world full of people desperate for attention, constantly performing on social media, chasing trends, needing validation, someone who genuinely doesn't care about any of that stands out. They're mysterious, they're deep, they're different, and toxic people want to own rare things. They want to be the one person who gets you, the one person you let in, the one person you need, not because they care about you, but because possessing something rare feeds their ego. You become a trophy, a conquest, a thing they can point to and say, see, even that person needs me. It's not love, it's not friendship, it's ownership. So here's the truth that nobody wants to say out loud. Loners end up surrounded by toxic people because of the very qualities that make them decent human beings. Their calmness, their stability, their introspection, their empathy, their patience, their non-confrontational nature. All the things that should protect them, that should keep them safe, actually make them targets. It's not fair, it's not right, but it's real. Toxic people don't go after the loud, confrontational, boundary-enforcing types. Those people are too much work. They go after the ones who'll tolerate, who'll listen, who'll forgive, who'll give chances. They go after the loners. But here's the part toxic people don't see coming now. Before this gets too depressing, let's talk about the twist. Because there is one. Loners don't stay surrounded by toxic people forever. At some point, something shifts. Maybe it's one too many boundary violations. Maybe it's the sudden clarity that comes from stepping back and seeing the whole picture. Maybe it's just exhaustion. Whatever it is, when a loner decides they're done, they're done. Not angry done, not dramatic done, not I'll come back in a few weeks done. They detach completely, permanently, irreversibly. No second chances, no explanations, no closure, no drama. They just disappear. And that's what toxic people fear in the long run. Because they know that once a loner sees through the manipulation, once they recognize the pattern, once they decide to cut ties, there's no bringing them back. You can't guilt-trip someone who's already forgiven themselves for walking away. You can't manipulate someone who's no longer listening. You can't control someone who's already gone. Once you realize what's been happening, once you see the pattern, everything changes. You start recognizing the warning signs earlier. The love bombing, the boundary testing, the emotional dumping, the guilt trips. You start understanding that your kindness isn't a flaw. Your empathy isn't weakness. Your preference for peace isn't permission. You start building boundaries that aren't just lines in the sand. They're walls with locked gates. And you stop giving people the benefit of the doubt when they've already shown you exactly who they are. Because here's the thing about being a loner who's finally learned the lesson. You become untouchable. Not cold, not cruel, not bitter. Just selective, protective, aware. You realize that your peace is worth more than anyone's presence. That your energy is sacred. That your time is limited. And you stop apologizing for protecting those things. So why do loners end up surrounded by toxic people? Because they're everything toxic people want to exploit. Calm, stable, empathetic, patient, and non-confrontational. But why do loners eventually escape? Because they're also everything toxic people can't ultimately control. Self-aware, independent, and unafraid of being alone. The toxic person thinks they've found the perfect victim. Someone isolated, someone kind, someone who won't fight back. What they don't realize is that loners aren't victims. They're just people who haven't reached their limit yet. And when they do, game over. No drama, no revenge, no looking back, just peace. And that's the power toxic people never see coming. The quiet, permanent exit of someone who finally chose themselves. If this hit home for you, if you saw yourself in these patterns, you're not alone. And I mean that literally and figuratively. There are millions of people out there who've been through this exact cycle, who've attracted toxic people without understanding why, who've given too many chances, who've stayed too long. But you know what? They got out. And if you're still in it, you can get out too. It starts with recognizing the pattern, it continues with setting boundaries, and it ends with choosing your peace over someone else's chaos. Subscribe if you want more content that cuts through the noise and tells you the truth nobody else will. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, because chances are you know at least one person stuck in this cycle. And drop a comment telling me, have you experienced this? How did you finally break free? What was the moment you realized what was happening? Let's talk about it. Let's support each other. Let's stop pretending this isn't real, because it is real. And it's time we started calling it out. Until next time, protect your peace, trust your instincts, and remember that being alone is always better than being surrounded by people who drain you. Now go out there and be unapologetically yourself.